Margaret stood in the grand hallway of the old French mansion, her breath catching as a crystal champagne glass shattered at her feet. The sound echoed through the marble floors like a warning. Across the room she saw her daughter, Emily, on her knees, scrubbing blood from her skin with a rag that looked too dirty to help anyone. "Emily," she whispered, but her voice trembled. The man who called himself Emily's husband, Henry, smirked from the doorway as if the suffering in front of him was a show made for his amusement. Margaret's fists tightened. "Not today," she muttered. Margaret marched toward Henry, her steps sharp and loud against the marble. The fear that flashed across the man's face told her she wasn't wrong to worry. "What did you do to her?" she demanded, her voice low but strong. Emily tried to keep scrubbing, her hands shaking the entire time. "Emily, sweetheart, stop," Margaret said gently. But Emily flinched like she had been struck. Henry laughed softly. "She enjoys the work. It keeps her humble." Margaret stepped closer, close enough to smell the expensive wine on his breath. "Back home," she growled. "Men like you don't stay standing long." The moment Margaret knelt to help Emily, a cold voice filled the hallway. Henry's mother, Margaret Dubois, glided in wearing a gown that rustled like whispering snakes. "Emily," the woman said sharply, "why have you stopped? Continue with your duties." Emily bent lower instantly, panic tightening her shoulders. "She is not a maid," Margaret said. "She is my daughter." The older woman smiled with practiced elegance. "In this home, she contributes in the way most suited to her abilities." Margaret stared at Emily's bruised wrist, the thin dress, the weight she'd clearly lost. "Her abilities," she repeated. "Or your control." Emily's eyes darted to Henry, then to his mother, as if asking for permission to breathe. Margaret felt her heart crack as she whispered, "Emily, look at me." After a long moment, Emily lifted her gaze. What Margaret saw made her stomach twist. Fear, shame, exhaustion, and something else. A silent plea. "How long has she been trapped in here?" Margaret asked. Henry scoffed. "She suffers anxiety. We protect her by locking her inside this mansion." Margaret shot back. Henry's mother stepped forward, voice cold. "This conversation is over. Dinner is ready, and you are expected to behave." Margaret rose, pulling Emily gently to her feet. Emily swayed like someone too tired to stand. "My daughter is coming with me," Margaret said. Henry blocked the staircase, panic rising in his eyes. "She cannot leave. She needs her medication." Margaret froze. "What medication?" Emily's hands trembled. Her pupils were too small, her movements too slow. "You're drugging her," Margaret whispered, rage building. Henry stepped closer. "She is unstable," he insisted. Margaret stepped forward, her voice turning to steel. "If you touch her again, I swear on my life, you will regret it." Henry's mother folded her arms, her face tightening with irritation. "Emily, tell your mother you are choosing this life," she ordered. Emily opened her mouth, but no words came out. She looked terrified, like speaking would cost her something she couldn't afford to lose. Margaret stepped in front of her protectively. "Don't force her to lie," she said. Henry leaned closer, his voice dripping with arrogance. "Emily is my wife. Her choices are mine to manage." Margaret stared at him with pure disgust. "If you believe that, then you have no idea who you're dealing with." Margaret placed her hand on Emily's cheek, feeling the faint tremor beneath her skin. "Emily, sweetheart," she whispered. "What did they give you?" Emily shook her head weakly. I can't leave," she whispered. "Yes, you can," Margaret said firmly. Henry grabbed Emily's arm, yanking her back with such force that Margaret gasped. Emily let out a tiny sound, barely audible. Margaret's eyes darkened. "Let go of her." Henry smirked. "Or what? You'll call American police." Margaret stepped closer. "No. I'll handle you myself if I have to." Before anyone could react, the sound of sirens pierced through the mansion's high windows. Blue lights flashed outside, painting the walls in bright streaks. Henry froze. His mother's face drained of color. Margaret raised an eyebrow. "Expecting visitors?" she asked coldly. Henry whispered, "We didn't call anyone." The front doors burst open and French police stormed in, followed by a woman in a dark suit with sharp eyes. "Madame Patterson," she asked. "I am Inspector Clare. We received a report about your daughter's safety." Margaret blinked. "I didn't call anyone." The inspector nodded. "No, but someone else did." Emily's breath hitched, her eyes growing wide. "Who?" Margaret asked. The inspector stepped forward. "Henry's sister, Maria Dubois. She contacted us days ago." Henry looked shocked. "Maria wouldn't." "She did," the inspector said sharply. "She's been gathering information for months." Margaret held Emily's hand tightly as the inspector continued. "She told us your daughter was in danger, drugged, and held against her will." Henry's mother snapped. "Lies." Claire ignored her. "We have evidence. And now we need to hear everything from Emily." Emily trembled but lifted her chin. "I'm ready." Emily's voice was weak but steady. 3 years ago," she said, "I found a diary." Margaret squeezed her hand gently. "A diary?" Emily nodded. "From another woman who lived here before me. She disappeared." Henry barked. "Enough," but police restrained him. Emily continued. "They told the family she died. But she didn't. She was kept downstairs." The inspector turned sharply. "Is she still alive?" Emily swallowed hard. "Yes, and there are others. They're not the only family doing this." Margaret felt her heart sink. "How many, Emily?" Her daughter's eyes filled with tears. "Too many, Mom. Too many." Inspector Clare immediately began giving orders in rapid French, sending officers toward the basement. Margaret wrapped an arm around Emily, feeling how frail she had become. "Sweetheart, you did so well," she whispered. Emily shook her head. "It's not over. There's more." Margaret studied her daughter's trembling lips. "Tell me," Emily whispered. "They took passports, phones. Everything from the women. They said we were mentally unstable, that we needed protection." Margaret felt a deep, sharp anger grow inside her. "They stole your life," she said. Emily looked at Henry, who stared back with hatred. "Yes. And there's two." Two officers returned, pale and shaken. "Inspector," one said, "we found a woman. Barely alive." Emily nodded. "That's Katrina. She's been here for years." Margaret felt sick. "Years." Emily nodded. "They never planned to let her leave." Claire turned to her team. "Search every room. Every locked door." Margaret held Emily tighter. "How did they break you like this?" Emily closed her eyes. "They didn't break me. Not fully. I recorded things. I hid evidence." Margaret's eyes widened. "You did what?" Emily opened her eyes, and for the first time, Margaret saw strength behind the fear. "I fought back." Emily reached into her faded dress and pulled out a tiny device. "I recorded every conversation," she whispered. "Every threat. Every woman they talked about." Claire stepped closer, astonished. "You gathered evidence under sedation." Emily nodded. "I had to." Henry lunged forward suddenly. "Give that to me." But 3 officers pinned him down instantly. Emily's hand shook. "Mom, I didn't tell them everything yet." Margaret cupped her daughter's face. "You tell me everything now." Emily swallowed hard. "There are more houses, Mom. More families doing this. It's a whole network." Margaret whispered. "Then we'll destroy them all." Henry's mother tried to speak, but Margaret raised a hand. "Every word you say will be used against you," she warned. The older woman's lips tightened with fear for the first time. Inspector Clare reviewed Emily's recordings on her tablet, her expression growing darker by the second. "These conversations involve political names," Claire muttered. "Bankers, judges." Margaret frowned. "Politicians." Emily nodded weakly. They're all connected. Claire exhaled sharply. This is bigger than a family crime. This is organized trafficking disguised as tradition. Margaret felt her stomach twist. How deep does it go? Emily whispered. All the way. More officers returned. Inspector, we found identification cards. American, Spanish, German. One reported. Many belonged to missing women. Margaret clenched her jaw. They took everything from them. Claire nodded grimly. They erased their identities. Emily looked down at her hands. They said they were helping us, keeping us safe from the outside world. Margaret lifted her daughter's chin gently. They lied to you. All of you. Emily breathed shakily. I thought maybe I deserved it. Margaret shook her head firmly. No, sweetheart. You were trapped, not guilty. The officer stepped forward. Inspector, they're ready to transport Henry and his mother. Margaret whispered. Good. As Henry and his mother were escorted away in handcuffs, Henry twisted around and shouted, Emily, you ungrateful. But an officer cut him off. Margaret stepped forward calmly. You don't speak to her anymore. Emily leaned into her mother weakly, watching the people who had controlled her for years being dragged out of the mansion they once ruled. Mom, she whispered, there's something else. Margaret brushed a strand of hair from her face. Tell me. Emily swallowed hard. I wasn't the only one gathering evidence. Someone else inside the family was helping. Margaret blinked. Who? Emily whispered. Maria. Inspector Claire nodded. Maria was the one who contacted us. She risked her life to get you out. Emily's voice cracked. They killed her, didn't they? Claire hesitated before answering. Her death was staged as an accident, but she died protecting someone. Emily covered her mouth. Protecting me. Margaret hugged her tightly. She gave you a chance. And you took it. Emily trembled. I can't let her sacrifice be wasted. Claire stepped closer. Which is why we need both of you to come to the station. There's more we need to discuss. Much more. Margaret nodded. We're ready. The police escorted Margaret and Emily outside. Emily winced at the sudden brightness. The world beyond the mansion almost too big after years locked inside. It feels strange, she whispered. Margaret tightened her arm around her waist. It's freedom, she said. But Emily shook her head. It's scary. Margaret nodded. Yes. But you're not facing it alone. As they walked toward the police car, Emily suddenly looked back at the mansion, her eyes filling with anger. They thought I'd never escape, she whispered. They thought they broke me. Margaret kissed her forehead. They were wrong. At the station, Emily was given water, food, and a blanket. A doctor examined her, shaking his head. She's been sedated for a long time. It will take days to clear her system. Margaret stayed by her side, holding her hand as Emily tried to stay awake. Mom, Emily whispered. I have something important. Margaret rubbed her shoulder gently. Tell me when you're ready. No, listen, Emily insisted. She pulled a flash drive from her pocket. Copies of everything. Financial records, messages between families, names of women, photos. Everything. Margaret stared. Emily, how did you manage all this? Emily closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks. I pretended to be obedient, quiet, broken. They never suspected I was paying attention. Margaret felt a deep ache in her chest. You survived by being smarter than them. Emily nodded weakly. I knew one day someone would come for me. I just didn't know it would be you. Margaret squeezed her hand. I promised I'd always protect you. Emily whispered. It's bigger than us, Mom. There are more women out there. More families. More houses just like that one. Margaret's eyes hardened. Then we're going to find every last one. Inspector Claire returned with a stack of files, her expression tight. Emily, your recordings. They don't just show what happened in the mansion. They reveal a network bigger than anything we expected. Emily tried to sit up, But Margaret gently kept her down. What kind of network? Margaret asked. Claire flipped open a file. We're talking about wealthy families across France, Italy, Spain, maybe more. Judges, bankers, politicians. All working together. Margaret's jaw tightened. To do what? Claire took a deep breath. To trap vulnerable women, take their identities, and use them as hidden labor. Emily whispered. Just like me. Margaret felt anger rise like fire in her chest. How long has this been happening? She asked. Claire looked at her gravely. Decades. Maybe generations. Emily shook her head slowly. They told me it was tradition. That women who married into these families were supposed to give up their old lives. Margaret squeezed her hand. They lied. Claire continued. The families used fake medical reports to declare the women mentally unstable. That allowed them to seize legal guardianship, cut off communication, and control everything. Emily's eyes brimmed with tears. That's what they did to me. They stole my choices. Margaret leaned forward, voice steady. Inspector, what happens now? Claire placed the flash drive Emily had given her on the table. We need to analyze this. If the data is as complete as Emily says, it could expose the entire operation. Emily looked away. There's more. Margaret frowned. More. Emily nodded weakly. There's a hidden room in the mansion. Not the basement, the real one. Has documents, photos, passports, letters. They kept everything from every woman who passed through that house. Claire's eyes widened. You saw it. Emily nodded. I memorized where it is. Claire stood abruptly. We need to secure that room before anyone destroys evidence. Margaret looked at Emily. How did you keep all this inside you for so long? Emily sniffed. I didn't want to die for nothing. I thought if I could just gather enough proof. Margaret kissed her forehead. You were fighting when everyone thought you were broken. Emily whispered. Mom, I want to testify. I want people to know what they did. Claire nodded. Your voice will change everything. But you'll need protection. These families don't let their secrets escape. Margaret said firmly. Then they'll have to go through me. Hours later, after Emily was moved to a private recovery room, Margaret stepped into the hallway to breathe. Everything felt heavy, the truth, the danger, the years lost. Claire joined her quietly. Margaret, I need to warn you. We intercepted electronic messages. Someone high in the network knows Emily survived. Margaret froze. What do they want? Claire's voice lowered. To finish what the Dubois family started. Margaret's expression hardened like steel. Let them try. Claire looked at her with admiration. You're not just a mother. You're a force of nature. Margaret shook her head softly. No. I'm just a mother who won't let monsters win. Margaret returned to Emily's bedside and found her awake, staring at the ceiling with a troubled expression. Mom, Emily whispered. Did Claire tell you everything? Margaret sat beside her. Yes. Someone in the network knows you're alive. Emily exhaled shakily. Then we don't have much time. Margaret brushed her hair back gently. You're safe here. Emily shook her head. Not if they're willing to kill to protect their secrets. Margaret held her hand firmly. Then we fight them. Together. Emily looked at her mother with a tired, grateful smile. I knew you'd say that. Later that night, Inspector Claire returned with new information. Margaret, Emily, she said, closing the door behind her. We have a serious problem. Emily struggled to sit up. What happened? Claire placed her tablet on the bed, showing a list of names and coded messages. The network is preparing to move the remaining women from their other locations. They're afraid we'll find them. Margaret's eyes narrowed. So they're going to hide them again. Claire nodded. Or worse. Emily covered her mouth. We can't let that happen. Margaret stood. Then tell us what we need to do. Claire took a deep breath. We need to locate every property mentioned in Emily's recordings before they relocate the women. Emily reached for the tablet. I remember some details. landmarks, accents, names of towns. Claire nodded. Your memory is the key to saving them. Emily closed her eyes, recalling painful images. There was a house near a vineyard. Another by the coast. One in Italy with blue shutters. Margaret touched her shoulder gently. Take your time, Emily whispered. Mom, they're running out of time. If they disappear again, no one will ever find them. Margaret turned to Claire. How soon can your teams move? Claire replied. Within hours. But we need precise locations. Emily opened her eyes slowly. I can sketch them. Claire looked surprised. You can draw them. Emily nodded. They made me clean every corner. I memorized everything. Margaret blinked. You memorized the houses. Emily gave a small, sad smile. When you're trapped, you study your cage. Claire handed her paper and a pencil. Emily began drawing with shaky hands, describing rooms, window placement, outside pathways. Margaret watched her daughter work, feeling both awe and heartbreak. After several sketches and detailed descriptions, Claire stepped back, stunned. Emily, this is extraordinary. You've given us enough to locate all 6 houses. Emily sighed with relief. Then go. Save them. Claire nodded and hurried away to coordinate rescue teams. Margaret sat beside Emily and took her hand. Sweetheart, you just saved dozens of women. Emily looked at her mother, eyes glistening. I just wish someone had saved me sooner. Margaret squeezed her hand gently. They will be saved because of you. And you're safe now. Emily whispered. For now. But this isn't finished. By morning, rescue teams across 3 countries moved based on Emily's drawings. Margaret stayed by her daughter's side, pacing the room anxiously. Any updates? She asked each time Claire entered. Finally, the inspector stepped in with a tired smile. 2 houses cleared. 21 women rescued. Emily exhaled in relief. What about the others? Claire hesitated. Another team is approaching the coastal property now. Margaret gripped the bed rail. Please tell me they get there in time. Claire nodded. They will. Emily whispered. I can't believe this nightmare is finally ending. But just as hope settled into the room, Claire's phone buzzed sharply. Her expression changed. Margaret. Emily, we have a new threat. Margaret braced herself. What now? Claire turned the screen toward them. A message read. She talks, she dies. Emily's breath caught. They found us. Claire nodded grimly. Someone within the network is watching our movements. Margaret stepped forward. Move us. Now. Claire replied. We already arranged transport. You're being transferred to a secure location. Emily's voice trembled. I don't want to hide. Margaret held her face gently. You're not hiding. You're surviving. The police van arrived quietly at the station's back entrance. Margaret helped Emily inside, noticing how pale she'd become. As the doors closed, Emily whispered, Mom, what if they still get to us? Margaret took her hand. Sweetheart, they've controlled your life for years. They're done now. Emily stared out the window. They're scared, Mom. Margaret nodded. Good. They should be. The van rolled forward with 2 escort cars leading. For the first time in a long time, Emily leaned her head on her mother's shoulder, trusting the world to protect her. Just this once. Halfway to the safe house, the radio crackled. All teams. Final property secured. 15 more women rescued. Network collapsing. Margaret closed her eyes in gratitude. Emily breathed. They're free. Margaret kissed her forehead. Yes, sweetheart. Because of you. Emily's eyes watered. I wasn't brave. I was afraid every day. Margaret shook her head. Courage isn't about not being afraid. It's doing something anyway. Emily looked down at her trembling hands. Then I guess I was courageous. Margaret smiled. More than anyone I've ever known. When they reached the safe house, the atmosphere was calm but heavily guarded. Emily was led to a recovery room where a nurse adjusted her fore carefully. Margaret sat beside her, gently rubbing her arm. "Rest," she whispered. But Emily shook her head. "I need to finish this. Have to testify. I want them all punished." Margaret nodded slowly. "You will testify, but you need strength first," Emily whispered. "Mom, if something happens to me..." Margaret stopped her. "Nothing will happen to you. Not anymore." Emily closed her eyes, finally allowing herself to breathe. Over the next days, headlines exploded worldwide. European trafficking network exposed. Dozens of women freed. International arrests underway. Margaret watched each report, holding Emily's hand while she recovered slowly from years of sedation. Claire visited often with updates. "The financial records you provided led to over 40 arrests," she told them. "Banks, politicians, even a former judge." Emily stared at the floor. "They'll pay for everything, won't they?" Claire nodded. "Yes. And because of your testimony, none of them can slip away quietly." Margaret smiled proudly. "You broke their entire empire, sweetheart." When the day of Emily's testimony arrived, she stood before the international panel, her voice steady despite the weight of her past. Margaret sat in the front row, hands clasped tightly. Emily spoke about the lies, the drugs, the isolation. She described the hidden rooms, the stolen identities, the women who didn't survive. Silence filled the room. When she finished, the panel members rose to their feet in respect. Margaret wiped tears from her eyes. Emily stepped down and walked straight into her arms. "It's over, Mom," she whispered. Margaret held her tightly. "You ended it." After the hearing, Inspector Clare approached them with a relieved smile. "All the remaining women have been safely transported to shelters. The network is officially dismantled." Margaret exhaled. "Thank God." Emily leaned into her mother. "So, what happens to us now?" Claire held out 2 envelopes. "New identities for protection. But the choice is yours." Margaret looked at Emily, letting her decide. Emily shook her head. "No more hiding. I'm done running." Margaret smiled softly. "Then we stay who we are." Claire nodded respectfully. "In that case, welcome to your new lives as survivors." That night, Margaret and Emily sat on a quiet balcony overlooking the city lights. For the first time in years, Emily looked like herself. "Mom," she said softly, "I don't want my life to be defined by what they did." Margaret nodded. "Then define it yourself." Emily took a deep breath. "I want to help others. Women who went through what I did." Margaret squeezed her hand. "Then that's what you'll do." Emily looked at her mother. "And you?" Margaret smiled warmly. "Wherever you go, I go. We fight together now." As dawn broke, the sky turning soft gold, Margaret wrapped an arm around her daughter and felt peace for the first time since arriving in France. Emily leaned against her, stronger than ever. They had come through horror, fought darkness, and helped thousands without ever meaning to. "Mom," Emily whispered, "we survived." Margaret kissed her forehead gently. "We did more than survive. We saved lives." Emily nodded. "Then let's keep going. Let's help others find freedom too." Margaret smiled, staring at the sunrise. "Together, sweetheart. Always together." And with that, the Patterson family began a new life, victorious.